All right, to both say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev Haba Alinu. Svi Ruvain ben Sheh is one of the bracha. Shav and Aliyah should be a Melitz Yosher for his children, his grandchildren, in Kanai Nahar 34. Semi and Malka Estherson in the memory of their parents, Ludwig, Stiefel, Yitzchak, Lee, Cohen, Sarah Stiefel, Sarah Rachel, Baruch Avram, Estherson, Hinda Bas Henech Ephraim, in the memory of their dear family, friends, Staff Sergeant Naftali Yona Gordon, Hashem Yikom Damo, Hanukkah 2023, and Paul and Kathy, taking the Sherman Josh, sister Leah Bas Shmuel and Zachrini, Shulamis Bas Shmuel, Esther Bas Zacharia. Learning sponsors Baruch Meir and Rina Dubin in honor of the upcoming Chasana of Sophie to Zevi Granat, and will take place this evening. B'Sha'a Tova Lachas Manzel Tov family. Chasana Kalash B'Zochem Meretz Hashem Binyan Adead Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov. Our Daf Yomi today is Steinberg in the school continued refuah for Shulamis Chana Bas Susha, as well as Marks, wishing a mazel tov to Baruch Meir and Rina Dubin on the upcoming marriage of their of Edgware, England. Mazel tov again to the Chassan and Kala. Build a binyan, build a home that Emer Hashem is filled with mazel bracha, simcha, and amer shanim tovos. All of the neshama shav and aliyah, all those who need a refuah, together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, Kodesh Baruch Hu should continue to share besoros tovos upon all of Klal Yisrael. Both say with that, let us begin. Is Ayin 72. We left off on the base 71b, and we left off actually kind of like in the middle of a sentence, but it's actually its own contained. So again, Dalavi Suri Hanoninu. So 2, 4, 5 lines off on the bottom. 71b. So if you remember again, our entire discussion of yesterday's daf was really focused on this idea that there are two mishnayos. There's a mishnah Meseches Zevachim, which is the mishnah we had on Ayin Amud Beis onto Ayin Aleph, really onto Ayin Aleph Amud Beis. The first now both mishnayos seem to be saying the same exact prohibited animal that gets into a mixture. Ultimately, again, the prohibited animal is not batal, not nullified, and again, we're going to get more into the mechanics of that today a little bit in Miras Hashem, and as a result, the entire mixture becomes prohibited. That's ultimately again what's unfolding over here. Now, the Gemara was obviously trying to understand why the redundancy. Why do I need what seems to be Mishnah 12? That hello, Zevachim and the Mishnah, Meseches dealing with different levels. And ultimately, again, no, not Asr. Actually picks up as the Lavi Suri Hana Hatanale. So the Gemara says, 1 second, but our Mishnah also talks about cases the Gemara says, Mi Katani. Katani. So the Gemara says, but talk about again halacha l'maisa numbers, and talks about the idea that in the shu, even any amount ultimately can create isur. So again, our Mishnah speaks about numbers. Numbers. So the Gemara. In other words, just go ahead and just put everything. More to which the Gemara says, this is very interesting. Hatakanta, someone says, Takanta it's strichale. But our Mishnah has something very interesting, which the Mishnah which discusses the remedy. Remember again, first of all, again, the nature of the prohibition, and then tells you to remedy the issue. Now remember again, there are different remedies for different cases, but just to give you raise just the type of carbon that get mixed in. Whatever the remedy is, the point Mishnah discusses not just problems, but our Mishnah ultimately discusses solutions. So the Gemara Maseches Tmura has problems, no solutions. The Mishnah Maseches Zevachim ultimately again discusses problems and discusses. And the Gemara essentially says we need Mishnayos that discuss solutions. I both say what a tremendous haskell. There are many more than two different kinds of people, but there are different kinds of people in life. People who are incredibly adept at identifying problems. They tell you a problem with every single thing in the world. And they can tell you problems in alphabetical order, chronological order, most severe to less severe. Your problems, someone else's problems, not their problems, right? All the problems in the world, right? And one thing they never are solutions. And there are people like that. And it's just like a sense, an ability to detect and to identify problems. And then I will say there are other people who, Baruch Hashem, yes, also could identify problems, also have the God-given talent to find solutions. Or at least approach every single problem. Be a solution-oriented person. Be a solution, or be a person who, yes, is good at identifying what's broken, but then also come with a way, with a plan. A Jew, which means find problems, or you could be a Zevachim Jew, which means incredible. It goes weiter. The hedyot not eternally. Now, to make is that perhaps the Mishnah discusses the idea that if a prohibited animal gets mixed in, the mixture is not only for karbanos, but ultimately again prohibited even for mundane everyday use. To which the Gemara says, well, 1 second, our Mishnah also, sorry, not our Mishnah, but we also learn about hedyot. So hedyot means, remember, as opposed to, let's say, the Mishnah which reference karbanos, right? The Gemara wanted to suggest that maybe the Mishnah Maseches Tmura is necessary because it seeks out the idea that when something prohibited get mixed into a mixture, it's even prohibited for mundane use. So the Gemara says the notion is prohibited even for mundane use. We have that in the a little chazara. By the way, that was a good mesachta. So, Avodah Zara. Okay, the Gemara says as follows. The hedyot nami tanale. What do we learn in Mesachas Avodah Zara? Here we go. Ve'elu asurin v'olshem b'chol shein. Both of the following items are prohibited, and when they get to a mixture, they prohibit any amount. What are these items? Yayin nesach. So remember again, nesach is wine that is used for Avodah Zara. Avodas kochavim and Avodah Zara. These items that when they get mixed in, ultimately again. Before you turn the page, take a look at the last Rashi on 71b. Rashi is the hedyot. Rashi says, "Nami tanale b'maseches avodah zara." We learned this in avodah zara already. Da'asire hana lo, that when you have something aser ba'ana, right? It's not batal barov. I will say again. Remember, I think I mentioned this in yesterday's daf, but my days are off a little bit. Yesterday's daf I did on Sunday. I recorded on Sunday. So again, in the previous daf, remember the whole. Whenever you have something that's mixed into something permitted, what's the halacha? Right? Chad betray. Generally, the Torah says that prohibited items are batal in a simple majority. Simple majority. So this notion that now you have things that are getting mixed in that are not batal is very unique on a biblical level. Discuss this more. But here, there's something that is asr ba'ana, something that is, and it gets, even if it's overwhelmingly overwhelming, but asr is. So the Gemara, so Rashi says, "V'lam lemisnei pacha bechatas isos v'sharhanis." You learn the concept that if you have something that's mixed in with other items, that we already some yayin nesach, and if you have some avodah zara that gets mixed in with permitted items, halacha l'maisa no. So if that's the case, why do I need this to be stated in our Mishnah over here in Zevachim? Ayin base 72a. So what does this Rabbi say? Tzrichi, I'll tell you why. Dini hasam, because based on the Gemara Maseches avodah zara, hava amina lehedyot. I would have say that if an item that is aser ba'anah material, that ultimately I get lehedyot for mundane purposes. Aval legavoa, but if you're talking about carbonas, then ema lo nifsidinhu lekulhu. So you have to understand something like this. I would have thought, when do we say something is aser ba'anah mixed in with other items that the mixture is aser? It's only the purpose. I'm not going to say that the resulting mixture is aser. Why? Because if the resulting mixture is aser, Abba said, then what? Then what's the issue? Loss to hektish. I might have thought that again, we don't cause such a loss to hektish. Therefore, again, our Mishnah comes along and says, no. See, suri hana, it says it is still going to be aser. V'mehacha, and if you would have Mishnah over here by Maseches Zevachim, Havamina, I would have thought like this. When do we say that it's aser ba'anah and it gets mixed in with other items? The resulting mixture is aser. When is that? Hanimili kash. It's dafka only for sacrificial purposes. Why? Demais. Because literally translated, it's disgusting. What does that mean? That the notion of potentially using something for sacrificial purposes that is prohibited, so that's a no-go. So maybe it's dafka on sacrificial purposes that the resulting mixture is aser. Aval chulin, when it comes to mundane things, aval chulin, the Gemara says, the lo ma'is, which is not disgusting, ema isuri hana'a lebata beruba. I would have thought that ultimately, again, we should employ typical bittul barov, application in a simple majority, therefore it's tzricha, therefore it's needed. Therefore, I will say this is incredibly important. So essentially, it turns out that I really have three different sources for these concepts. We have a Mishnah Maseches Tmura, we have a Mishnah Maseches Zevachim, and we ultimately again have a Mishnah and Maseches avodah zara. Now, interestingly enough, now with the Gemara, so yesterday's daf was really much Zevachim, Mishnah and Tmura. Now the Gemara is another Mishnah. Why do I need this Mishnah in Maseches avodah zara? This is very important. What I will say is that when you have the resulting mixture is going to be aser, even what we call lehej, for simple mundane use. Our Maseches Zevachim highlights the idea that when you get mixed in with other items, the result is aser legavoa. You cannot use it for sacrificial purposes. Avodah zara teaches us you can't even, because if it was just ultimately again, the resulting mixture is aser for mundane purposes, but for sacrificial purposes, you're not going to have such a loss to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, therefore I need avodah zara. The resulting mixture ultimately again is aser the Beis Hamikdash, because it's not nice to offer something up like this in the Beis Hamikdash. It comes along and says even for mundane purposes, it's going to be aser. So I will say that all of these composite mishnahs is that gets mixed in other permitted items. Both the gavoa for the Beis Hamikdash and ultimately again for hedyot for regular use. The mixture remedies. Our Mishnah discusses what you can rectify these prohibited mixtures. That because remember again that first case of our Mishnah where the chatas case. Again, not every single thing, not every single problem has a solution. So not every single mixture has a remedy. But let me say, our Mishnah got the remedies. Good. Now we've taken care of Zevachim, we've taken care of Tmura, we've taken care of the Mishnah and Maseches avodah zara. Now the Gemara goes back and kind of like dials us back a little bit. I don't understand. Why don't Here's what's fascinating. We'll say the Mishnah is operating under an assumption. And what's the assumption? That the prohibited item is why not? Again, I just want to point out, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, it's the third line from the top. Rabbi said this is incredibly important. Midda oraisa. So Isser, prohibited matter, is nullified in a simple majority. That is biblical law. Simple majority. So then Gemara just asks, I don't understand. Why in all of these cases, whatever it is, the Shur HaNiskal, why isn't it batal barov? So we'll say, it's interesting. Well, maybe you'll say significant. Therefore, what? About this, we're saying, what's the whole idea of bittul, right? The whole idea is ultimately, again, when you have an item that finds itself in a majority, the identity of the minority is swallowed up by the minority. It's not necessarily true where the minority item, if it's important, then the mice again, it's not batal. To which the Gemara says, batal. So we'll say, get ready for this. This is Amar Kol Dar Es Shedar Kalim No Shaninu. Now, this is so interesting over here. So the Gemara says, okay, so now what you want to tell me is maybe the reason in the items, the prohibited items are not batal is because they're chash. I will say, see, what makes something chashuv? What makes something important? So we'll say, in general, chashuv is that it is an item that is reckoned as an individual entity, as opposed to an item that's always sold in a group. So we'll say, I'll give you, I've just used this for illustrative purposes. An egg is something that's always part of a group, right? You don't think you can go to the store and buy, right? You can't buy one egg in a store, right? So in other words, so an egg by definition is something that is only sold as a unit. So, Jeremy, I'm wrong? You could buy 2 eggs in a store? Oh, come on, man. Come on. Seriously. Right? So, a raw. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'll be more specific, right? Right. So, you can't go into the supermarket and buy buy a raw egg. So, in general, when we speak of something being, what it means is the item is important. She's sold. Watch this. Exclusively, right? It's never sold as part of a group. Oh no, what it means is it's an item that is commonly sold as an individual unit, but as part of a group. It says that's what it means over here. So we'll see, if you look at Rashi, this is incredible. First short line in Rashi, Kol Shadar Kalimnos, she gave minyanam, the Batli Besamach Bahach, the Chavile Tilson, Shapir, the Habehemos Nami Harp. So we'll see, for example, just Lashon of Kol Shadar Kalimnos is commonly counted. So once again, that refers to are items that are often sold as so a good example is we're going to get this moment, but listen to this. But the Gemara says animals are good examples of this. Why animals are good examples? Why? So again, it would be common that all livestock are sold one. However, I will say it's not uncommon that right? So let's say commonly, again, a flock. I don't know, a flock is 21 sheep, right? Like a Sanhedrin cotton, right? 21 sheep, right? So let's say so, but it wouldn't be uncommon for an extra sheep. Okay? So that's what it means when it says kol shadar kol limno. That is commonly sold as an individual. Yes, sometimes it is sold as a group as well. That's the lashon of kol shadar kol limnos. Anything that's normally counted. So that makes sense, right? Ultimately, again, what are we trying to figure out of it? We don't say bittul. We don't just say bittul, right? The prohibited animal gets mixed in, just say a row. So the Gemara says, oh no, it's chashuv. It's chashuv, it's important, therefore it's not batal. So okay, so that makes sense. Kol shadar kol limnos. Shadar kol limnos means sold as an individual unit. Sometimes, though, it's sold as part of the collective, is chashuv and therefore not batal. I'll say, what is shadar kol limnos? Exclusively sold as an individual unit, never sold as part of a group. That doesn't apply to animals, because animals are often sold as individual units, but sold as part of a group as well. If that's batal. To which the Gemara says, she says, means that is exclusively sold as individual units. Well, if that's the case, that doesn't apply to animals. So although animals are often individual units, they're often also sold as part of a group as well. Because of that, therefore, they be quote unquote chashuv, and for they could be batal. So we'll say before the Gemara applies this Mishnah, the Gemara applies this machlokes. And I will say this probably, by the way, is one of the just again to define the terms. Kol reckoned as an individual entity, even though it's still part of a group, is still called chashuv. It's still looked at as an individual entity. Limnos means the only thing that is considered something ultimately that is exclusively sold as an individual entity, never. Interesting. Son, listen to this. This is a type of spice. So apparently, again, a bundle is considered to be exceptionally chashuv. Incredible. So apparently, fenugreek is where the quote unquote item is the same as the source, as the tree. I think it grows on a bush more than a tree, right? That it grows up. Interesting. He says, ubalav fenugreek. Good fenugreek. So as I say, if you have, so again, remember, fenugreek is not sold by the stalk, but rather, again, it's sold by the bundle. So again, if you have a bundle, plague carrot means it grew right in a prohibited mixture. So what's that? Yadliku. Yadliku means it has to be destroyed. Has to be destroyed. Right? So we'll say, so that, by the way, that's a common expression for klaya keren. Whenever you have a prohibited mixture, so ultimately, lashna bachirim, kulon yadliku div Rabbi Meir. So we'll say, now watch this. So let's say you have a bundle of fenugreek. Okay, so for example, this grew in a vineyard. Klaya keren. Therefore, that kula that's saying close is going to be faster. What do you do with klaya? What do you do with it? You destroy it. Let's say now that bundle of fenugreek gets mixed in other bundles of fenugreek. It got mixed with other bundles, and then get mixed with other bundles. All of it has to be. So again, I will say, even if you have 1,000 bundles of permitted fenugreek, all has to be destroyed. The Chum say no. It's bottle. Now it happens to be for klai, the ratio for bittel is 200 to 1. 200 to 1. So as long as bottles of fenugreek, ultimately bottle of fenugreek, bottle, and is going to be mutter. I was saying, what's the machlokes over this? Now, by the way, by 200 to 1, right in south. Tomorrow says, Rameir says is this: Kol shedarko limnos mekadesh. Again, so Rameir says Kol shedarko limnos. Now, what does it mean? Kol shedarko limnos. Kol shedarko means anything that is often looked at or is often sold as an individual unit, even if not exclusive, so is chashuv. Because it's chashuv, therefore it's not. And because of that, sold as an individual unit, therefore it's chashuv. Because it's chashuv, and it gets mixed in with even 1,000 fenugreek, it's not going to be bottle, and therefore the entire mixture is aser. The entire mixture is aser. On the other hand, the Chum say no. Six things that again are never bottle in the majority because they are so important. What are the Rabbi Kiva says Shiva, Rabbi Kiva says the seventh thing as well. What are these? Also here it is. Ve'eluhain. What are these items that are so important that they are never bottle? Eluhain egoze prach. These prach nuts. Right, these pomegranates from Badan. This is very interesting. Sealed barrels of wine. Remember again, a sealed barrel is much. The wine is being. So a sealed barrel of wine and chilfei tardin, beet stalks. It says beet stalks. So the Gemara says the kilchei kruv and cabbage stalk. Big gourd. Okay, so those are the 6 items of the that are apparently so chashuv that these items only exclusively as individual units. Many more permitted items, they're never bought. As in over here, Rabbi Kiva Mosif, even loaves of bread that are made by balabayis. Opposed to loaves of bread, ultimately again, they're by a baker. Right? Bakers' loaves are like a pro forma loaf. They are commonly complicated, but the loaf of a balabayis ultimately again is chashuv, because when a person makes bread, their bread is. That's what Rabbi Akiva adds on. If you take a look at Rashi, she should up in the bottom. Hey, as hakol hamisarvim bahen b'toch shem gidolim uv'dimeyem yikarim v'chashuvim b'minon. So Rashi says over here, amongst these now large, very large. What it just means is not tiny. Number 2 is they're expensive, they're important. So these are the items. These are the items that Chum say. These 6 items Rabbi Kiva adds in the 7th, the loaves, that are never bottled in a mixture. And therefore, haray la'arla, haray la'klaya kerem. If any of these items are mixture into arla, and if they're klaya kerem, they turn the rest of the mixture into klaya Meir and the Chachamim. Now watch this. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Es Shadarka Limnos Shaninu. Rabbi says, which means items are commonly sold, but not exclusively sold as individual units. But are commonly sold as individual units. Therefore, what? Therefore, Allah said they're chashuv. Because of chashuv, they're never bottled. Reish Lakish Omer Kol Shedarka Limno Shaninu. Reish Lakish says no. These items are chashuv. Why? I said just the Rabbi Yochanan says these items are exclusively sold units, and therefore halacha l'maisa Because of that, they are considered they're never batal. They're never batal. Rish Lakish Omer, no, they're not units. More often than not, sold as individual. Therefore, they're chash. Again, so before we go on, right? Let's just remember from over here. What did we start with, right? What did the Gemara start with? The Gemara says, let's take this back basics. He was introducing us to cases of where something that is prohibited is mixed into a much larger mixture. What did the Mishnah say essentially in all of the cases? It's not batal. The Gemara says, why not? Why not? Why not apply simple bittul barov? What the answer? The answer the Gemara gave, simple answer, is that the one word, chashiv, important. So both say, now obviously, what we're saying is because something that is important is not batal in a larger majority. How do you define chashiv? So we just went through this entire incredibly exciting journey. Who never knew the fenugreek, whether the fenugreek could be so exciting, right? So we went through this incredibly exciting journey about halacha, what's not batal, and all of this comes back all to Rabbi Yochanan says, what's the definition of a chashiv item? An item that is sold as an individual unit, never sold as part of a group. Reish Lakish says, no. Reish Lakish says, even an item that is commonly sold as an individual unit, part of a group, is also still called chashiv. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So the Gemara says, so our Mishnah makes sense according to Reish Lakish, right? Why does it make sense according to Reish Lakish? Because halacha l'maaseh say our case is animals. Right now we assume what's the status of animals? Status of animals is kol shedarko limnos. In general, how is an animal sold in general? As an individual unit, in general. But can it be given away as part of a group also? Of course. So that's what's called kol shedarko limnos. So ultimately, again, it stands. So let's read this now. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, ultimately, again, by knows what is there to say? To which the Gemara says, Papa, the Tana of our Mishnah is the Tana ultimately again of measure. Kitzios again refers to. We'll see what this case is. The Amar, top of Ayin Gimel. We're just going to read these first two lines. I know. Right? So it says, who the Amar called Davar Sheyish Bo Minyan. Okay, so it says, so now we're opening the door to other items over here. So we'll say, watch this. Now the Gemara ultimately again to what's called Davar Shebeminyan. Okay, so what's a Davar Shebeminyan? Take a look at the top Rashi. So we'll say it's really exciting. By the way, for those of us who are doing Smichas Chaber, this is also exciting. We're not up to this yet, but when we get to Halachas of Tarulas, all of them are going to be 73a. Called Davar Shebeminyan. Kol Shedarko Limnos Kla. See, Rabbi say, it's so interesting. Up focusing on Kol Shedarko Limnos, Es Shedarko Limnos. Something exclusively sold as an individual unit, or something nothing called Davar Shebeminyan. Rashi says over here, Kol Shedarko Limnos Klal. Anything that is ever counted as an individual unit, Kigon Litros Shal Kitzir. Adam a Mochrin Meminyan Ela Darsin Oso Bi. Call it Hoil Upanim Shemon Litros Levad Lemochrin Minyan. So as a Davar Shebeminyan says, anything at any point in time reckoned as an individual unit has its own chashibos. So this is fascinating because up until now we're focused on to become chashuv. What has to be exclusively sold as individual majority of times sold in a Jew. There's another concept called Davar Sheba Minyan. Davar Sheba Minyan means anything that is reckoned as an individual unit, whether it's common, uncommon, as occurs at some point, that item has an inherent chashivah. So again, I will say there's another Tana, another school of thought. In this school of thought, that any Davar Sheba Minyan, whether it's biblical law or rabbinic law, is not batal. I'll say, so this introduces a whole new vista. This is now a new Tana. So we have Eshedar Kalimnos, Kol Shedar Kalimnos, a school of thought that says, Kol Davar at any point in time is ever looked at as an individual entity, even if it's not reckoned as such, ultimately, again, as well, how to apply that ultimately, in our case, in Meretz Hashem, to all right, have a great no one sells Tilson yet. The bundle is the unit because the stock is nothing.
Wait, everything, make it sound at all.
Yeah, small daf. Oh, Hashem. It only works in a very specific case.